from Massachusetts is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Georgia for yielding me the customary time, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by asking, do Republicans even have the votes to pass this rule? Because if not, then what on earth are we doing here? Wasting more time? Even your own members are fed up, Mr. Speaker. Every week wondering if someone's going to throw a fit, if Donald Trump is going to post something crazy and blow everything up, if Mike Johnson is going to bring something to the floor when he doesn't have the votes. The chaos and the dysfunction around here is unhinged. We wasted hours and hours at the Rules Committee last week debating and voting on a rule that never came to the floor. And for what? Because Congress passed a bipartisan housing affordability bill, and the president had a temper tantrum, refused to sign it, and derailed everything? I mean, really? And why? Because he's still busy trying to fraudulently claim that the 2020 election was stolen, and now he wants to use that as an excuse to try to rig the midterms. Let me remind my colleagues, this is the United States of America. It is still the United States of America. We're not China or Russia or some two-bit dictatorship. This is insane what is going on here. Families cannot afford rent. Folks are priced out of buying a house. And Donald Trump is asking about the bipartisan housing is asked about the bipartisan housing bill yesterday, and he says it's so unimportant. He says it's so unimportant. And then he says, I made a lot of money with housing. The American people are not asking whether Donald Trump made a lot of money in housing. They are asking why they cannot afford it. They are asking why his economy sucks, why their prices are going up, and nobody in this Republican administration seems to give a damn. So now we're back with another rule. Maybe it passes, maybe it doesn't. Who knows anymore? This rule includes a national defense authorization bill with a trillion, that's with a T, $1 trillion price tag. I should tell my colleagues that we already spend more on our military than the next six countries combined. I mean, it's an astronomical amount. You know, over another $1 trillion on our military budget. Boy, that's so wild and extravagant, even Dr. Strangelove would be impressed. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me get this straight. You guys want to give Donald Trump over $1 trillion for the Pentagon? Donald Trump, who started an illegal war? Donald Trump, who got 13 American service members killed because he started a war to distract from the Epstein files? That's who you want to give $1 trillion to? I mean, get real. The State and Foreign Operations Bill is a mess, too. It guts all the programs that actually prevent crises before they explode. So when the next war, famine, pandemic, or global breakdown knocks on our door, just remember it was Republicans who set the stage, just like they did when they cut funding for screwworm protection. There's a Social Security disability bill that hands more authority to an administration already targeting programs that working people rely on. And then we get to this Republican self-esteem exercise. Yet another non-binding resolution praising Republicans for the big, ugly bill. Mr. Speaker, I have a secret for you. I checked with my staff. Not a single person has called my office saying, Congressman, I think Republicans should spend time congratulating themselves on a bill they passed last year that took away my health care and is directly responsible for raising my bills. I haven't gotten a single call about that. What exactly is it that my Republican friends are congratulating themselves for anyways? I mean, you passed the big ugly bill a year ago. Since then, gas prices have gone up. Grocery prices have gone up. There's a new war in the Middle East. Health care is more expensive, and fewer people have it. Child hunger has gone up. The tariffs are crushing farmers and driving up costs. That's what you guys are doing a victory lap over? Really? I mean, really? And never, never have we seen so much inequality between the rich and the poor in this country. Regular people are getting screwed while the top 0.001% saw their incomes go up by, get this, $20 million last year. You guys could not be more out of touch if you tried, Mr. Speaker. There might be hours of floor debate on these crummy bills this week, but right now we're here to talk about the Republicans' agenda, their plan for the week. And the truth is that their bills are just more of the same old status quo nonsense that people back home are sick and tired of. The Republican agenda is a nightmare for this country. The American people are in an economic crisis right now. They are getting screwed by the policies of this administration. Their wallets and their pocketbooks are getting cleaned out by this president and this majority's billionaire-first agenda. and then they turn on C-SPAN today, and God help them if they do. But what do they see Republicans bringing to the floor? Not a bill to help deal with rising inflation and economic uncertainty. No, no, no. Their focus this week is a resolution to congratulate themselves on a bill that they already passed last year. And in case they haven't noticed, for most people, things have gotten worse since then, not better. People are looking to this place and wondering whether anybody at all on the Republican side has any idea what their life is actually like. They believe that this Republican majority is just out of touch, out of sync with where regular people are. And if you look at these awful, lousy bills, the answer is obviously no. And I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, no doubt the Democrat Socialists of America believe everything that the gentleman from Massachusetts just said, but the majority of Americans are smart enough to know that those things are simply not true. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Boy, that was a good retort. Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to strike the section adding the Save America Act to the NDAA during engrossment. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I think the SAVE Act is an awful bill. It's not about election security. It's about relitigating Donald Trump's loss in 2020. And he did lose. He lost big. It will make it harder for American citizens to vote if this SAVE Act stays in or ever becomes law. And here is another thing that is clear to everyone, or should be. This little maneuver by the Speaker is a nothing burger. It's a shell game. It's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain pretending to do magic. And here's the truth. The SAVE Act will not become law. Even if this rule manages to pass, the Senate will not pass an NDAA with the SAVE Act included. They have already said that, and Leader Thune, 5 days ago, already filed cloture on the Senate's own version of the NDAA without the SAVE Act. And at the end of the day, it's very simple. Republicans are using procedural tricks to try to make it harder for people to vote because they can't win elections the old-fashioned way. They can't win them fair and square. And it's offensive. And in the case of this MERV scheme, it's downright stupid. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
And Mr. Speaker, to discuss our proposal, I yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Alabama, the sponsor of this amendment, Ms. Sewell.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member McGovern, for allowing me to speak. I rise today in opposition to attaching the Save America Act to the NDAA. You know, this week, Mr. Speaker, marks the 250th anniversary of our nation's independence. And yet, instead of working to strengthen our democracy, Trump and Republicans are hell-bent on undermining it. While we should be celebrating how far we've come since the days of Jim Crow voter suppression, Republicans are working to drag us back. Old battles have indeed become new again. Mr. Speaker, the so-called Save America Act is nothing more than a scheme devised by my colleagues across the aisle to save themselves from accountability at the ballot box. It is a voter suppression bill designed to block millions of eligible voters from casting their ballots. Let me be perfectly clear. We all agree that it is important for citizens to verify who they are during the voting process. But this bill is not about voter ID. It is so extreme that even a valid driver's license would not be enough to register to vote. This bill is about one thing and one thing only, making it harder for Americans to vote and easier for Republicans to win. Here are the facts. Rampant voter fraud is a myth. It does not exist. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. In fact, under current law, non-citizens would face up to 5 years in prison for attempting to vote in federal elections, and they would even risk being deported. That's why the fact of the matter is that non-citizens voting is roughly 0.0001%, according to the Brennan Center. This legislation is an egregious attempt to solve a problem that is not based in reality. The solution to this non-existent problem is not to prevent eligible voters from voting and accessing the ballot box. Mr. Speaker, roughly half of all Americans do not have a valid passport. In my home state of Alabama, that number is even higher. More than 72% of Alabamians do not have a passport. To get one, most Americans would have to pay an application fee of $130. Mr. Speaker, this is nothing more than a modern-day poll tax. There are also 69 million women who have changed their last names after getting married. Those women would not be able to vote using their birth certificate. Under this voter suppression bill, up to 21 million eligible Americans would be blocked from exercising their right to vote. The SAVE Act also requires states to purge their voter rolls on a consistent basis without requiring common sense measures like requiring officials to notify voters before removing them from the voter roll. That means that eligible voters would risk learning that they have been removed from the polls at the election day. Keeping voter rolls accurate is important, Mr. Speaker, but it must be done by using quality data and best practices to ensure that citizens are not inadvertently removed from the voter roll. In my home state of Alabama, an effort was made to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls using data from the state's Department of Labor. The data was highly incorrect, and what we found is 93.8% of the voters removed were U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens being removed because my state thought that they were using something accurate in removing the voter roll. Let me say this again, 93.8% of the voters removed were U.S. citizens. Mr. Speaker, this is very personal to me. I am a proud daughter of Selma, Alabama, and the representative of Alabama's Voting Rights and Civil Rights District. It was in my hometown 61 years ago where hundreds of foot soldiers like John Lewis shed blood on a bridge for the equal right of all Americans to vote. They marched, they bled, they prayed, and some even died for the right to vote. The so-called SAVE Act makes a mockery of their legacy. As America celebrates its 250th birthday, we in Congress should be working to make voting more accessible, not less. Our democracy functions best when every citizen is given an opportunity to participate in our elections. I urge all my colleagues to vote no on the previous question, no on the rule, and to oppose any efforts by President Trump and Republicans to suppress the voting rights of Americans. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The key provision of this, one of the key provisions, is the National Defense Authorization Act. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation that is passed every year for the last several decades and passed out of committee with a strong bipartisan vote. I just want to encourage the American citizens to understand this with regard to our national security and our national defense and how important this piece of legislation is. Up to and until 2022, in order to launch a satellite, the United States was buying rockets from Russia. 2022 is the last time we purchased rockets from Russia to launch satellites, and 2024 is the last time we actually used a Russian rocket to launch a satellite. We have to invest in our defense industrial base so that we are not dependent on the enemies of the United States of America to provide for the security of the American citizens. The National Defense Authorization Act, in a very bipartisan manner, does exactly that. This rule needs to pass, Mr. Speaker. We need to ensure that we are not dependent on our adversaries for our national security. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I would just again remind the gentleman and others that we already spend more than 6 of our nearest competitors in terms of military spending combined. I mean, we're talking about $1.5 trillion. It's trillion with a T, going to the defense budget this year. And I got to tell you, I really think we ought to have a debate in this Congress about the definition of national security. And I think it ought to include things, like health care. My Republican friends cut $1 trillion from health care. People are losing their health care left and right. If you don't have health care, you don't feel very secure. National security definition also ought to include, the quality of education we provide our young people. It ought to include things like ending hunger in this country. We're the richest country in the history of the world. We got 48 million Americans who don't know where their next meal is going to come from. It ought to include housing, whether people can afford housing. We have an affordability crisis right now that we tried to address in a bipartisan way, but Donald Trump had a meltdown. It ought to include supporting our veterans and cleaning up our environment. It ought to include things like investing in our workforce. All of those things are sources of our national strength that are getting shortchanged here. So, forgive us if we're not getting excited about this massive increase in military spending at a time when the average American is getting screwed. Enough. I mean, when you go back to your district and you talk to people in coffee shops, I mean, they're not worried about whether we're spending $900 billion or $1.5 trillion on our military spending. Most of it goes to defense contractors. I mean, what they're worried about is whether they can afford their groceries, whether they can afford their rent, whether they can afford the gas for their car. Those are things that are real, whether they can help send their kids to college. All of those things matter. And, Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 2.5 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you to the ranking member. 8 million Americans have lost their health insurance over the last year. 8 million Americans lost their health insurance. Millions more have seen their health insurance premiums go up by hundreds and thousands of dollars. Hospitals and community health centers have shut down all across the country. Why? Because our Republican colleagues passed the big ugly bill last year that cut funding from health care in order to fund tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. And that's not all. They also cut money from SNAP. 1 million children lost their SNAP benefits over the last year. Children going hungry. People who are sick and hurt, not able to go to the doctor because they can't afford it anymore. And I see our Republican colleagues, they don't understand why their bill isn't more popular. They don't understand why the American people aren't grateful to them for cutting their health care and cutting their food aid in order to pay for tax cuts for rich people who don't need it. They tried changing the name of their bill. They don't call it the Big Beautiful Bill anymore. They said, well, maybe if we change the name, then people will like the fact that they can't afford to go to the doctor anymore because of our tax cuts for the rich. Well, that didn't work. So now they are proposing to use floor time this week to vote on a resolution congratulating themselves for passing this monstrous bill that has cut health care and cut food aid for the American people in order to pay for tax cuts who don't need it. Oh, don't worry. The bill did more than that, by the way. One thing that it did fund is more ICE agents invading American cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, killing American citizens in broad daylight. Why aren't the American people grateful for that, they wonder? Well, maybe a resolution congratulating ourselves for doing this. Maybe that'll do the trick. Why aren't the American people grateful for the fact that whatever small tax relief was included for the middle class is outweighed dramatically by the increased costs from the tariffs and the war and the health insurance premiums skyrocketing? Well, Mr. Speaker, how about this? How about we as a Congress, instead of using this floor time on meaningless resolutions, actually do the work of the American people? How about we fund health care? How about we fund food aid? How about we fund education instead of yet more tax cuts for Elon Musk and the billionaires partying at Mar-A-Lago while working people suffer?
Expired.
With that, I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Wow. A couple of things, Mr. Speaker. One is federal tax revenues are actually up this fiscal year over last fiscal year, and that's because the economy is doing pretty good under President Donald Trump. Again, tax revenues are up 5% over last year. I want to mention one other thing. People under the age of 18 were exempt from the changes we made in the SNAP benefits. Under 18, they were exempt, and yet they still stand up and say, we kick children off of SNAP. Read the law. Read the law. If you're under 18, you're exempt from the change that we made. I want to speak, Mr. Speaker, about something that's in this piece of legislation, in this rule, that's wrong, that I've tried to correct for many years, and if we get the chance to vote on it, I hope we will get it corrected. And I want to tell you, several years ago, I went to Bethesda, and a young man that I represented had stepped on a pressure plate, and he lost both legs in Afghanistan. And I stayed in touch with the young man, and a couple of years later, I was taking him hunting. I remember exactly where I was, on 475 in central Georgia. And he told me, he said, I work at O'Reilly's Auto Parts, but I have to be careful, at the time it was $1,100 a month, to make sure that I don't make more than $1,100 a month, or my family loses the Social Security benefits. And we talked a little while about this, and I told him, I'm like, hey, you know, when I get back to D.C., I'm going to meet with the lawyers because that just doesn't sound right. And I came to D.C., scheduled a meeting with the attorneys up here that deal with Social Security, and I met with them and I had the discussion with them, and they told me that that was actually the law, that that was correct. So here we have this young man, combat wounded, totally and permanently disabled, who wants to go back to work. And I'm a firm believer that the number one thing we can do for our veterans, especially when it comes to veteran suicide and their mental health, is to get them back to work as soon as possible. And so I wrote a piece of legislation that's had multiple co-sponsors from both parties, from all spectrums of the political divide, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, moderate, and we haven't been able to get it through because of some of the budget rules that plague this place with good ideas. And so now we have 8884, and if it is passed, I am confident that the concept of the Purple Heart Freedom to Work Act will be put in place as a pilot project. And so what it would allow people to do is, for people who are combat wounded, totally and permanently disabled, it will allow them to go back to work and keep their Social Security benefits. It shouldn't take as long as it's taken to do this and to get this passed. But if this rule passes, I'm confident that H.R. 8884 will pass. And if we can get it through the Senate, and that's a big if with getting anything through the Senate, then hopefully our combat wounded, totally and permanently disabled veterans can go back to work and not be afraid of going back to work because they would lose their Social Security benefits. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have to admit I was taken a little bit aback by the gentleman's statement earlier when he said the economy is doing, quote, pretty good. I think those are his exact words. And I'm kind of stunned by that because inflation is up, the prices of groceries are up, the price of gas is up, the price of housing is up, the price of everything is up. And people, by every poll that has been conducted, whether it's on the left or the right or in the center, says the same thing. The people are not satisfied with this economy. They do not think it is pretty good, no matter what their party affiliation is. They do not think it's good. Now, maybe if you're a Republican in the House of Representatives and you hang around with the Mar-A-Lago class, maybe they think it's pretty good. I mean, Elon Musk is now the first trillionaire. I guess he thinks it's pretty good. But, you know, if you're the average worker, whether it's in Massachusetts or Georgia or California or South Dakota, you don't share that view because it isn't. Things are actually pretty bad. Things are pretty bad. And the gentleman said that, like, poor kids are not losing their SNAP benefits. Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to insert into the record an article entitled "Over 700,000 Poor Kids Across 12 States Have Lost Food Aid Under Trump GOP Budget Law."
Without objection.
And I want to amend, this article appeared in May 2026. That number is now estimated not at 700,000, but at 800,000 in this country. And think about it. Think about it. The economy's doing pretty good, and in this country that we live in right now, the United States of America, we have close to 50 million Americans who don't know where their next meal is going to come from, who are hungry. I don't think they think the economy's pretty good. And a lot of these people, in fact, the majority of these people, are working families. They're working harder than ever, but because everything is going up, they can't afford groceries. Go to any grocery store in this country, and you'll see people actually putting groceries back on the shelves because their paychecks don't stretch as far as they used to because prices are going up. And by the way, it's not just the big ugly bill, it's the president's stupid tariff policy, which are raising prices all across this country. And the war in Iran, that I don't even know if he knows what the hell he's doing. It just goes on and on and on. And again, I mean, we're spending countless, dollars on this war, again, which is resulting in energy prices going through the roof. So, no, people do not think the economy is pretty good. They do not. And I suspect that is what is behind this effort by Republicans to try to rig the midterm elections, because they know that the American people are not happy with where things are. And it's not just Democrats, it's not just independents, but a whole bunch of Republicans. A whole bunch of Republicans are also dissatisfied. And I would urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to go to coffee shops, to go to diners, to go to grocery stores, to go to VFW halls in their district and listen to what people are saying. They are not happy. They are very, very concerned about the state of the economy. And they're not confident that things are going to get better. And they do not think that the person running this country right now has any clue about what the reality is for working families. He lives in a different sphere altogether. He's worried about reflecting pools and building, monuments in his honor and redoing the East Wing that he said would cost nothing, but it's going to cost us billions when all is said and done, cost the taxpayers billions. That's what he's consumed about. They want a Congress and they want a government that cares about them. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, might I inquire as to how much time remains on each side?
Gentleman from Georgia has 14 minutes and 45 seconds. Gentleman from Massachusetts has 8 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any additional speakers. I'm prepared to close if the gentleman is. If I want you to. I've listened a lot today and I want to get back to the heart of this matter. The National Defense Authorization Act. The National Defense Authorization Act. That is what this rule is about. It's about H.R. 8884 and allowing, in the case of the legislation that I had, Purple Heart, people who are combat wounded, total and permanent, having the ability to go back to work and not worrying about losing their Social Security benefits, at least for a period of time. The Appropriations Act for our State Department and things that we do around the world. There's a lot in this rule, Mr. Speaker, and this rule needs to pass. And yes, the Save America Act will be attached to the legislation when it goes across, because yes, we do think y'all are letting non-citizens vote in elections. We know you're doing it at the local level. And we think that places like California ought to get their ballots counted before the end of the night, not before the end of the week. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve the balance of my time until the gentleman's prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
But I do want to remind the gentleman that it was the Republicans that put into this rule a bill to congratulate yourselves on the big ugly bill. And it was the gentleman who said that people think this economy is doing pretty good. And I take issue with that. There are people, who are losing their health care. Republicans like to pretend that their big ugly bill, which cut Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by more than $1 trillion, didn't actually hurt anyone. I mean, there are lots of real stories of people being hurt. Kathy and Jeffrey Maney, who live in Brandon, Vermont, are owners of a garage door installation and repair business. They said that their premium was jumping up from $625 a month to nearly $2,670 per month. And the cheapest alternative they could find was still nearly $2,000. Kathy and Jeffrey ended up dropping their coverage. The economy's not working good for them. Eric and Lisa Frankenfield, a chiropractor, and his wife, who live in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, said their premium was set to skyrocket to $1,928 per month, up from $340 per month. So they decided to go without coverage this year. Lisa said that, quote, "We are healthcare providers who cannot afford benefits. Oh, the irony," end quote. Caitlin Provost, a 37-year-old single mom and social worker from Henderson, Nevada, saw her premium jump from $85 to $750 a month. She said she would like to she would likely drop her own coverage in order to keep insurance for her 4-year-old daughter. I mean, these are real-life stories. I go on and on and on and read them here. The economy is not pretty good for them. The economy is lousy for them. And there's nothing that is in this rule that we will consider that will help any of them. In fact, there is nothing that this Republican Congress has done to help any of them. Instead, you've made their lives worse. And so the economy is not doing pretty good. And the idea that you're going to congratulate yourselves on the passage of the big ugly bill, well, I just have a difference of opinion. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to address a couple of issues. One is he said healthcare providers can't afford their benefits. Well, that's because you turned the whole system over to a select few extremely large health insurance companies that are accountable to nobody, and they're not paying their claims. They're not. You know, my father was a surgeon. A lot of my friends are in the healthcare business. Let me tell you something. When you gave United Healthcare and the other multi-billion-dollar corporations control over all aspects of our lives, you did a lot of damage, and you did that in your so-called Affordable Care Act. And if the Affordable Care Act had worked, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So you want to talk about the problems in the healthcare system, you need to look in the mirror, because y'all wrote the bill, and now those big insurance companies aren't accountable to anybody. They own the PBMs, they own the pharmacies, they own the doctor's offices, they own the hospitals. They are huge, huge oligopolies that cater to nobody other than their shareholders. Look at the share price of the large health insurance companies. Look who you made rich with the Affordable Care Act. It was the shareholders and the executives of all of those major health insurance companies. And when I talk about the economy, yes, I realize that the American citizens are paying more. Inflation, which started because of the so-called American Rescue Plan, I think that's what y'all called it, and your so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Why did you name a bill the Inflation Reduction Act? Because you started the inflation with the American Rescue Plan, and then you turned around and passed the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that just exponentially escalated the amount of inflation that the American citizens were having to deal with on a regular basis. My point with the economy is this. Real GDP grew at a 2.2% annual rate for the full year of 2025. That beat the baseline expectations. Yes, American citizens are having challenges. One of the reasons they're having challenges is the cost of energy. And you know what? I'll admit, after Donald Trump tried to end the Iranian jihadist control over what was happening around the world, and he's done a pretty good job with it. And let me tell you this, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, knows exactly what he's doing with Iran. He knows exactly what he's doing with Iran. And if you would get the briefings, you would understand why. And in fact, I would point out that a U.S. senator that doesn't like the president had a few things to say, and as soon as he went and got the briefing, he turned around and reversed his position. So instead of blaming everything on Donald Trump, you should get the facts. But the cost of energy is embedded in every single thing that we do and that we buy. And when the Democratic Party does things like canceling the Keystone Pipeline, like stopping the development of nuclear power plants, like stopping oil and gas developments inside the United States of America, it hurts the American citizens. It hurts the American citizens, and it leads to inflation. And so, you know, I'm sorry that we're having to deal with the inflation that the Democrats started with the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act and the pain that has come from that. And I'm sorry the American citizens are dealing with the pain of the Affordable Care Act. I wish we could have repealed that horrible bill, but we didn't get it done. We didn't get it done. But healthcare providers who can't afford their benefits, they can't afford their benefits because the insurance companies that you turn the system over to aren't paying the claims. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I find it's rich to be lectured about health care from my Republican friends. Let me tell you what Democrats did with the Affordable Care Act. By passing it, it stopped health insurance companies from charging sick people more premiums than healthy people. It kept health insurance companies from denying coverage to pregnant women and people with pre-existing conditions. It demanded insurance companies cover more preventative services. It allows young adults to stay on their parents' insurance until they're age 26. I go on and on and on. What did my Republican friends did? They cut $1 trillion from health care. And by the way, I should remind the gentleman that Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate, Republicans control the White House, and health care prices are going through the roof under your watch. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
The Affordable Care Act created a system where the major insurance carriers are not answerable to anybody. You did this to the American citizens. It's your responsibility. With that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is
Speaker,
recognized.
how much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman has 5 minutes and 15 seconds remaining.
Is the gentleman prepared to close? All right. Well, then I will yield myself the remaining time. Mr. Speaker, I could go on health care all day, but I would just urge those who are in the gallery and those who are watching, I mean, look at your own health care bills. Look at your own health care coverage now after nearly 2 years of Republican control of government. And the bottom line is people are losing their health care benefits. And in this country, that is unconscionable. Mr. Speaker, I have served here a long time, and I've seen majorities struggle before. I've seen close votes. I've seen disagreements. This is something else entirely. This is a majority that cannot function unless Donald Trump is lucid and in a good mood. And even then, it's a coin flip. I mean, Americans need cheaper housing. They need a raise. They need health care that doesn't break the bank. They need a government that lowers prices and brings down inflation and protects them. Instead, what they're getting is a Republican administration that raises prices, increases inflation, and protects the Epstein pedophiles. Republicans promised they would lower prices on day one. It's now year two. They've been in complete and total control for almost 18 months. They run Washington. And if you go home and ask people in small towns and big cities, in suburbs and in rural communities, in states across this country, how things are going with Trump and Republicans in charge, they will tell you the truth, which is that things are getting worse because Trump's economy sucks. He swore he would end inflation. End it. Those are his words, not mine. He said he would end wars. He's starting them. He promised gas would be cheap. The national average is nearly $4 a gallon. The only people who are doing great right now are the billionaires, and now a trillionaire, and the greedy corporations that help Republicans get elected, because that is who they work for. And I think people are sick and tired of it. They're sick of watching Congress lurch from crisis to crisis. They're sick of Republicans spending more time managing their own egos than lowering anybody's bills. And let me just end with this. As we celebrate our country's 250th birthday this weekend, we have so much to be proud of as Americans. We have so much to celebrate and be thankful for. Each new generation that has fought to expand the circle of our democracy and make real the promise of our founding has brought us closer to the dream of a more perfect union. And that's what makes America great. And I'm looking forward to spending this 4th of July with family and friends back up in Massachusetts, the birthplace of America, where our citizens came together to overthrow the most powerful army in the world and establish a government of, by, and for the people. But the truth is that right now, too many people feel like this country is run of, by, and for the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected. And you know what? They're right. People see the corruption, the greed, the self-dealing, and the self-enrichment of this president's family and his crooked administration, and they are fed up with it. And I believe that patriotism means calling your country to a higher standard. Patriotism means telling the truth, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is Americans are hurting. Costs are too high, and our democracy and freedoms are under assault by an out-of-control, lawless administration run by a president who thinks he's a king. And Republicans are either too busy pledging allegiance to Trump to notice, or too distracted fighting with each other to care. And we can do better than this. We should do better than this. We must do better than this. Reject this rule. Stop acting like a cult. Let's bring back bills that actually help people. And for God's sake, let's start acting like America again. And I urge a no vote on this rule, a no vote on the underlying bills, and I yield back.
Chairman yields. Members are reminded, they already know it, but they're reminded again to refrain from engaging in personalities and disparaging remarks towards the president. As well, members are reminded not to reference guests in the gallery and are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair, not to each other in the second person. There is decorum here as well. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time, and I know that you were talking about the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, who has done something that will probably never be done again in the history of the country. Been elected in 2016 and 2024. And I want to say this as we talk about health care and health insurance and the other things. This side of the aisle recognizes there are problems. And this side of the aisle recognizes that the only way to fix those problems is to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Now, the other side of the aisle thinks that they did a perfect job. A perfect job. Well, let me tell you something. Before the Affordable Care Act went into place, United Health Group was trading at $28 a share. Today, it's $415 a share. And that's after about a $140 a share drop. The only thing the Affordable Care Act did is make a bunch of health insurance executives rich. They're not paying their claims today. And one thing we could do, and I wish we would do, is to give the state insurance commissioners the authority to step in and make them pay their claims. I can tell you, my local hospital has about $15 million outstanding with United Health Group. Small hospital, $15 million. Big company, small hospital. I don't know if my hospital will ever get paid. But that's not what this one's about, Mr. Speaker. This week, the House can advance 4 pieces of legislation under this rule. It's about the National Defense Authorization Act, H.R. 8800 for fiscal year 2027. It authorizes a historic $1.15 trillion to rebuild the American defense industrial base and arsenal. This act implements a peace through strength agenda and restores lethality to our armed forces by investing in modernization and multi-year procurement for weapon systems production to deter our adversaries. It also makes a significant investment in the quality of life for our service members and retention opportunities. The fiscal year 27 NDAA reforms key programs and saves taxpayer dollars, resulting in a ready, capable, and lethal fighting force. This legislation will deter China and counter Russia, North Korea, Iran, and foreign terrorist organizations while leveraging our alliances across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Finally, this act strengthens our nuclear deterrence, prioritizes the Golden Dome, and grows our nation's strategic space capabilities. This is bipartisan, must-pass legislation that every one of my colleagues should support. Additionally, H.R. 8595, the National Security Department of State and Related Programs Appropriations Act 2027, delivers on an American First policy agenda. This protects our allies, confronts our adversaries, cuts waste, and puts America's national interest first. It strengthens embassy security, fights fentanyl, defunds radical programs, and ensures every dollar advances American security and prosperity. Further, H.R. 8884, the Removing Barriers to Work for Disabled Americans Act, allows the Social Security Administration to test new approaches on a voluntary basis and without impacting the participants' overall income to ensure Americans with disabilities are not punished for returning to the workforce. Finally, HRES 1383, commemorating the one-year anniversary of the enactment of the Working Families Tax Cuts, highlights the largest tax reform passed by Congress in decades, making permanent the tax cuts passed under the first Trump administration, ensuring a tax cut for over 140 million Americans. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting yes on the previous question and yes on the rule. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields back.
Yields. Yes. Okay, the question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask
For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The gentleman seeks the